My name is Nassime Saps.
Canada's Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland wanted February's Freedom Convoy crushed so that she would look good as a strong ally of Ukraine in the event of a Russian invasion. Freeland stomped civil liberties here in Canada to look like she was standing up to Russian fascism. What a joke. Today I'll show you the documents to prove it. Cross-border vaccine mandate brought in for truckers catalyzed the Freedom Convoy after 2 years of pandemic restrictions. The convoy grew into a large-scale human rights movement in Canada, which demonstrated peacefully in the nation's capital, Ottawa, for 3+ weeks, until the Liberals used the Emergencies Act to enable mass arrests, warrantless property seizures, and freezing of bank accounts of participants, supporters, and organizers of the convoy. And Deputy Prime Minister Freeland cackled as she announced the freezing of financial assets of protesters as though they were Al-Qaeda financiers. Remember this?
So you're confirming that accounts have been frozen, both personal and corporate, but you're not releasing the information. And the actual follow-up is, I'm just wondering whether the bank accounts will be targeted of individuals who donated to the Give, Send, Go and the GoFundMe campaigns. Are they considered designated people under the Emergencies Act, meaning that their credit cards could be cut and financial services are targeting them as well?
Okay, so the names of both individuals and entities, as well as crypto wallets, have been shared by the RCMP with financial institutions, and accounts have been frozen, and more accounts will be frozen.
And I find it so interesting, the irony of the universe. And this little article came across my desk. Why it popped up, I don't know. It's from the Ottawa Citizen in 2017. But it's basically confirmation that our Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, her grandfather was basically a Nazi collaborator, and they've come up with proof positive. And I kind of find that's interesting in the light of what has just happened up in Ottawa, that there should be that sudden connection being made, because I don't know if you quite realise this yet, but the government had an incredible coup take place in the way of information. This protest, this convoy, enabled the government to invoke the Emergency Measures Act. And as I mentioned in a previous video, the Act is in force from the moment it is invoked, even though it still has to go through that whole process, 7 days to go through that process of the House of Commons and the Senate. But whilst it's in force, and I forget who it was, whether it was Chrystia Freeland or Justin Trudeau, but I was watching them, listening to them making an announcement, and it may have been in the repealing of the Emergency Measures Act, but they say that it was in force for 10 days. And during that 10 days, I don't know if you remember, but Chrystia Freeland said that she wanted every bank and financial institution and platform to review their relationships with their customers in light of the Emergency Measures Act, and to hand over all information to Cyst, okay, or to the RCMP. So they have got a treasure trove now of information that was hacked out of Give, Send, Go. And who knows what that is going to lead to in the future. And there were 200 accounts frozen, including Druthers. I listened to an interview with the sub-editor, or the assistant editor, of Druthers. And yes, so there were accounts that were frozen and are still frozen, although they did announce that they would be unfrozen once you contacted the bank, and the Governor-General had signed the repeal of the Emergency Measures Act. But, like I say, should anything like this happen again, that government has a lot of information leverage that they can use against anybody that might want to speak up. And this is the general silencing of the voice of the population. So here we go, Ottawa Citizen. Chrystia Freeland's granddad was indeed a Nazi collaborator. So much for Russian disinformation. And you'll see this is March 8th, 2017. It's kind of interesting that it's resurfaced at this moment in time. And here she is, the wonderful Chrystia Freeland. Don't you just love that sweet little face? Wouldn't hurt a fly, would you, honey? The news conference on Monday by Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland was interesting not for the announcement that Canada was extending its training mission to Ukraine, but for the questions and answers about the minister's grandfather. There have been a number of articles circulating about Freeland's Ukrainian grandfather, Michael Chomyak, and his ties to the Nazis. Some of those articles have appeared on pro-Russian websites. Freeland, who strongly supports Ukraine and is a major critic of Russia's seizure of the Crimea, suggested to journalists that the articles about her grandfather were part of a Russian disinformation campaign. The Russian government sees Freeland as virulently anti-Russian and has placed her on their travel ban. American officials have publicly said, and even Angela Merkel has publicly said, that there were efforts on the Russian side to destabilize Western democracies, and I think it shouldn't come as a surprise if these same efforts were used against Canada, Freeland told reporters after they raised questions about the articles about her grandfather. The Globe and Mail also reported that an official in Freeland's office denied the minister's grandfather was a Nazi collaborator. In addition, the claims were dismissed outright by those in the Canadian-Ukrainian community. It is the continued Russian modus operandi that they have, Paul Grod, president of the Canadian-Ukrainian Congress, told the Globe and Mail. Fake news, disinformation, and targeting different individuals. It's just so outlandish when you hear some of these allegations, whether they are directed at Minister Freeland or others. Well, it actually isn't so outlandish. Michael Chomyak was a Nazi collaborator. What are the sources for the information that Freeland's grandfather worked for the Nazis? For starters, the Ukraine archival records held by the province of Alberta. It has a whole file on Chomyak, including his own details about his days editing the newspaper Krakowski Wieści. Chomyak noted he edited the paper first in Krakow, Poland, and then in Vienna. The reason he edited the paper in Vienna was because he had to flee with his Nazi colleagues as the Russians advanced into Poland. The Russians tended to execute collaborators as well as SS members. See the archive story below. And here we are, Chomyak Michael Fons. Date range 1919 to 1983. Scope and content. This Fons contains personal papers of Michael Chomyak, 1905 to 1984, a prominent figure in the Ukrainian-Canadian community in Alberta. He grew up in western Ukraine, annexed by interwar Poland. Michael Chomyak graduated from Lviv University with a master's degree in law and political science. In 1928, as a journalist, he started work in the Ukrainian daily Dilo, and from 1934 to 1939, he served on the editorial staff. During the Nazi occupation, he was the editor of Krakowski Wieści, published first in Krakow, then in Vienna. Chomiak's family immigrated to Canada in 1948 after a brief period of manual labour. Michael Chomyak found employment in Sherritt Gordon Mines Limited in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, remaining with the company until retirement. So what was the Krakowski Wieści? It, like a number of publications, had been seized by the Nazis from their Jewish owners and then operated as propaganda outlets. Here is what the Los Angeles Holocaust Museum has to say about Krakowski Wieści and a similar newspaper, Lewinsky Wieści, both publications associated with the Nazi regime. The editorial boards carried out a policy of soliciting Ukrainian support for the German cause, the Holocaust Museum noted. It was typical within these publications not to give any accounts of the German genocidal policy, and largely the editions resorted to silencing the mass killings of Jews in Galicia. Ukrainian newspapers presented the Jewish question in light of the official Nazi propaganda corollary to the Jewish world conspiracy. In 1943 and 1944, both Lewinsky Wieści and Krakowski Wieści hailed the German-approved formulation of the 14th Waffen-SS Division, Halychina, composed of Ukrainian volunteers, the museum pointed out. So much for Russian disinformation. On Wednesday, the Globe and Mail reported that Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland knew for more than 2 decades that her maternal Ukrainian grandfather was the chief editor of a Nazi newspaper. The photo below shows Chomiak at a party. He is to the right of the man smoking. On the far right-hand lower corner of the photo, in uniform, is Emil Gastner, the Nazi administrator in charge for the press of the region, including Krakow.
After World War II, United States military technology here, okay? By great leaps and bounds. Oh, okay. And it has never stopped. The war is upon you, and then all of the goodies are going to come out. Mark my words, it's going to happen. When the war happens, that's when you'll see all of the goodies come out. What do I mean goodies? All the tech, all the technology. Technology invented by Nazis, okay? The technological might of the United States military, the roots foundation of it is Nazi in origin. You have to understand this. You have to understand that. Please understand that. That all of this is connected. And all of this is focused on one very religious goal, okay? These people have a religious goal, okay? Their life goal is a religious one. And if you want to know exactly what it is, go to your search engine, look up Lucis Trust, Lucis Trust, United Nations, okay, and then after that type in Luciferian initiation. So, in the United Nations, this was a real true statement coming from the United Nations itself that says, worldwide, there will be a grand Luciferian initiation for all people, and it will be the only way for you to enter into the new age of the New World Order, and that all people across everywhere will have to undergo the Luciferian initiation in order to live in that world. This is coming from the devil.